Welcome to the Sad Crime Channel. Today's story took place in Germany, in the Berlin district of Lübars, and it shocked the country in 2012. Due to German privacy laws, the media often does not publish the full names of those involved in criminal cases, which is why only initials are sometimes used in reports. However, the case itself is real and well documented, and sources will be included in the video description. What followed was a sequence of events that, at first glance, appeared confusing and isolated, but later developed into one of the most disturbing cases investigated in the region. On the morning of June 21st, 2012, Berlin was already warming up for what looked like an ordinary summer day. On the outskirts of the city, close to a wooded area in Lübars, everything appeared calm and unremarkable. Nothing suggested that anything was wrong. That changed when a woman walking nearby came across something she was never meant to see. A body lying in a secluded spot near the forest edge. Within minutes, emergency services were alerted and police units were on their way. When officers secured the scene, the atmosphere immediately raised concerns. There were no clear signs of a violent struggle, no obvious clues pointing to what had taken place, and no immediate explanation for how the young woman had ended up there. The silence of that morning would later be remembered as something almost unsettling. This was the beginning of the case of Christin Rexin, a case that would soon grip Germany, not just because of what happened, but because of how many questions it left unanswered. Christin was 21 years old. Those who knew her described her as someone naturally bright and approachable, a young woman whose presence often lifted the mood of a room without her even trying. Her kindness was not something forced. It was simply part of who she was. From the very start, investigators understood they were dealing with a complex situation. There was no obvious motive, no immediate suspect, and even the medical findings initially left room for uncertainty. It was the kind of case where every detail seemed slightly out of place, as if the truth was just out of reach. And so the same questions began to surface again and again: whether anything had been missed, whether there had been warning signs, and whether the outcome could have been prevented. Christin had been born on August 30th, 1990, and grew up in Berlin with her family. But from childhood, her strongest connection was not to the city itself. It was to horses. She spent as much time as she could around them, and it was in their company that she felt most at ease, calm, focused, and completely herself. People often relied on her. She was the kind of person who would step in without being asked, whether it was for friends, family, or even acquaintances who barely knew her. At 19, she took her first steps into professional training at the Goldnebelhof riding stable near Berlin. And it was there that her path crossed with Robin, a meeting that, at first, seemed completely ordinary, but would later become part of something far more complicated. Christin later learned that Robin, together with his mother Cornelia, intended to take control of the Goldnebelhof riding stable. She didn't hesitate. She simply went to Robin and asked him directly whether he would soon be taking on a supervisory role over her. That question quietly marked a change in the dynamic between them. What began as a working relationship gradually developed into something more. It was built on shared routines at the stable, a common passion for horses, and a growing familiarity that turned personal over time. Christin felt she had found someone who understood her world without needing explanations. She was happy. For a period of time, everything in her life seemed to align: work, passion, and her relationship all moving in the same direction. At some point, she decided she wanted her parents to meet Robin. During Easter 2011, Robin and his mother visited Christin's family home. From the outside, the meeting appeared completely normal. There was nothing unusual about the way it unfolded. It looked like a natural step forward. But even then, things were already developing in the background in ways Christin did not yet see. What seemed stable on the surface was, in reality, far more fragile. There were later claims that multiple attempts were made on Christin's life before anything final happened. At least 4 incidents were mentioned during the investigation. At the time, however, none of this was publicly understood. Life continued. Christin was focused on building her future. Together with Robin, she spoke about plans, work, and eventually running their own place. She often described him as a talented showjumper with ambition and clear goals for the future, someone who wanted to create something of his own. That ambition had direction. One of his ideas was to take over Goldnebelhof, a respected equestrian centre that could have become the base of their shared life. But there was one major obstacle: the cost, around €600,000, far beyond their reach at that stage. So they adapted. They began looking for alternatives, and in October they moved to Wust, where they rented a smaller equestrian facility. The plan was simple: start smaller, build up, and eventually create something of their own. For a while, it worked. Christin's family could see she was doing well. She was engaged, motivated, and still fully connected to the world of horses. She seemed like herself again. She was exactly where she wanted to be, surrounded by horses, working in what she loved, and building a life with someone she trusted. Financial support for their plans came from Robin's mother, Cornelia, who worked in insurance and had experience with financial matters. Cornelia moved in with the couple and became part of their daily life. To outsiders, she appeared polite and composed, present, but not intrusive. Christin trusted her. She believed things were under control and that there was no reason for concern. When Christin's father asked how they were managing financially, her father questioned how all of it could possibly be affordable. Christin reassured him that there was nothing to worry about. She explained that Cornelia had a stable income and a pension, while Robin earned money through competitions. She believed that together it would be enough to sustain their plans. For a short period, that explanation seemed to make sense. Life continued, and on the surface, things still appeared to be moving forward. But gradually, small problems began to emerge. At first, they were minor and easy to overlook. Nothing that immediately caused concern. However, over time, financial pressure started to build, and the situation became less stable. Money was becoming an issue more often than before. It was the first clear indication that something in their arrangement was not working as intended, or at least not in the way Christin believed it was. As time went on, uncertainty replaced confidence. Then came worry, and eventually a quiet sense that something was no longer right. Initially, Christin tried to rationalize it. She saw it as part of the process of starting something new, a normal stage when building a business from the ground up. Sacrifices were expected: less comfort, tighter control over spending, and temporary financial strain. So when she was informed by Robin's mother that she might need to temporarily go without a salary, she accepted it without protest. She trusted Robin and believed that their shared plan would eventually succeed. Her family began to notice inconsistencies and started asking questions about her employment and income. Christine dismissed their concerns and avoided further discussion, insisting she would handle it directly with Robin. She did not want outside involvement. In her view, this was their private matter and their shared project. They were still trying to make their vision work, building a stable of their own, step by step. But reality was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Financial pressure continued to grow, and the strain slowly began to affect their everyday life. Then one day, a call came to Christin's family home. Her mother answered. Christin was on the line, sounding distressed. She explained that Robin and Cornelia had left the property, leaving her there alone. There was no food for the animals, no supplies, and the situation had become unmanageable. She said she could not leave and did not know what to do. Her mother immediately went to help her. When she arrived, she supported her daughter and tried to bring some stability to the situation. Christin felt embarrassed that it had reached that point and that her mother had to intervene. Later that same day, Robin and Cornelia returned. They showed no visible concern about what had happened. No explanation was given, and no apology was made. The situation was not addressed. Things simply continued as if nothing unusual had occurred. Christin and her family initially tried to interpret what was happening as a temporary setback. From their perspective, it appeared to be a phase driven by financial strain and mounting pressure, something they expected would eventually stabilize. In the period around Easter, arrangements had already been made for a family meeting at Christin's parents' residence. Attending were her parents, her siblings, Christin, Robin and Robin's mother, Cornelia. The gathering took place without any recorded signs of conflict. Food was shared, conversation took place, and the overall atmosphere appeared ordinary on the surface. Shortly after this meeting, Robin made contact with Christin's family. During the call, he sounded unsettled and did not provide a clear explanation. He stated that an incident had occurred and that Christin had been transported to hospital, but he did not specify the nature of the event. At that stage, there was no confirmed information available to the family. This led to uncertainty and multiple possible interpretations, ranging from an accident to a sudden medical issue. The ambiguity was only resolved once Christin's parents arrived at the hospital. There, they were informed that Christin had sustained a serious stab wound to her back, positioned between the spine and kidney. The injury was assessed as deep and life-threatening, requiring immediate surgical intervention. Medical staff proceeded with emergency treatment, while her family awaited further clarification. Following surgery, Christin survived. She regained consciousness and briefly communicated with her father, indicating that she was stable and suggesting that he return to work. Despite the outcome, no clear explanation for the circumstances of the injury had yet been established. At that point, Christin's survival was confirmed, but the broader investigation had not yet begun. To establish how the hospital admission occurred, the timeline was reviewed from an earlier stage in Wust. The incident is understood to have originated at the property where Christin had returned after riding. Inside the kitchen area, Cornelia was present and seated at the table. No prior conflict or disturbance had been reported in relation to their interaction. Christin inquired about Robin's whereabouts and was informed that he had left the property briefly and would return later. The situation remained unchanged until a sudden physical altercation occurred. Christin reported being struck from behind. Upon turning, she observed Cornelia holding a knife. A struggle followed immediately. Christin attempted to defend herself and disarm the attacker. During the incident, she sustained a deep wound to her hand, but managed to break away and distance herself from the situation. Following the incident, Christin contacted Robin directly and asked him to return immediately, stating that his mother had attempted to harm her. Cornelia later provided an explanation to police and medical personnel, describing a sudden panic episode. She reported long-term anxiety following the death of her husband and claimed that during the event she experienced a loss of awareness and control over her actions. A psychological evaluation was reportedly conducted, and her condition was interpreted as a dissociative blackout, which was considered relevant in assessing responsibility. At the initial stage, authorities did not pursue a full criminal investigation. The matter was treated as an incident linked to mental health factors and was not escalated further. Within the household dynamic, Robin found himself in a conflicted position. His connection to his mother was difficult to reconcile with the seriousness of the situation. Christin's family attempted to provide support, but the circumstances placed increasing strain on everyone involved. Over time, a persistent sense of tension developed around the case, affecting daily life and relationships. What had once appeared to be a functioning living arrangement began to show signs of instability and unresolved conflict. Rather than being viewed as an isolated event, the situation raised concerns that it could be part of a broader pattern of escalating issues. Despite the circumstances, Robin remained closely involved with Christin and continued to support her during her recovery. He was present, attentive, and consistently involved in her care. At the same time, Christine made a clear decision to avoid contact with Cornelia. After leaving hospital, she did not return to the property in Wust and instead moved back to her parents' home in Lübars. She consistently maintained that Cornelia was responsible for what had happened, while distancing Robin from direct involvement, describing him as supportive during the aftermath. Her account did not fully align with the perspective of those around her, but she remained firm in her interpretation of events. Despite ongoing emotional and financial pressure, a potential opportunity emerged when Robin identified a prospective buyer for one of their horses, a stallion named Goto. Christine, who was familiar with the animal, became directly involved in the sales process. A woman named Tanya travelled from Recklinghausen to view the horse. She expressed strong interest and indicated that the animal suited her needs. The meeting was followed by a brief celebration, marking what appeared to be a positive development for their financial situation. Shortly afterwards, Christine received confirmation that the purchase would proceed, and arrangements were made for a follow-up meeting. Initial plans involved a meeting at a fast food restaurant. However, due to navigation issues, the location was changed to a parking area near a swimming facility. The meeting took place in the evening. Tanya appeared cooperative. A small gift was exchanged in the form of sparkling wine. Christin later described the meeting as successful and expressed relief that the sale had been completed. Later that night, she received a call from Robin requesting a further meeting involving all parties. She informed her family that she intended to go, stating that Robin would be present and that she would not be alone. The meeting was scheduled for a late-hour time period at the same general location. Her family expressed concern about the timing and setting and advised against her leaving. Christin decided to proceed regardless. The investigation later established that there had been 4 separate attempts leading up to Christin's death. The first was clearly identifiable, while the second and third were described as so subtle that neither Christin nor her close relatives recognized them as warning signs. The 4th attempt ultimately resulted in her death. From there, police focused on reconstructing the final hours of her disappearance. That night, Christine left the family home while her mother remained inside. She later went to sleep, planning to wake early for work around 4 a.m. When she got up the following morning, she immediately noticed that Christin's car was no longer parked outside. She checked her daughter's room and found it empty, which prompted her to wake her husband. At that point, the family began attempting to contact Robin, but he stated that he did not know where Christin was. Her mother's concern escalated quickly. She drove to the parking area near a swimming facility, the location where Christine had arranged to meet Tanya. Upon arrival, she located Christine's vehicle. Attempts to reach her daughter by phone were unsuccessful. When she approached the vehicle, she discovered that it was unlocked. Christine's personal belongings, including her handbag, were still inside. This detail was unusual. According to the family, Christine never left her car unsecured and always took her belongings with her. She removed the handbag from the vehicle and returned home immediately, where she woke other family members and reported that something was wrong. Dennis and Patrick, Christin's brothers, then went to the same location. They searched the surrounding forested area, calling out for her. Patrick later stated that they feared she may have been attacked or injured nearby and left unconscious. At that point, the family was unaware that a body had already been discovered earlier that morning by a local resident at approximately 6:30 a.m. Police officers who arrived for their morning shift initially expected a routine day, but were instead informed of a fatal discovery involving a young woman on the outskirts of the area. The case quickly escalated into a full homicide investigation. During the initial briefing, investigators confirmed that the body had been found in a wooded area near the town. Meanwhile, family members were still actively searching in the same vicinity. When officers encountered Dennis and Patrick, they asked who they were and why they were searching the area so early. The brothers explained that their sister had not returned home during the night. Shortly after, they were informed that a woman matching Christin's description had been located deceased nearby. The search ended immediately. Dennis then contacted their father and told him to come to the parking area, stating that something serious had occurred. When the father arrived, he found the area sealed off with police tape and officers already securing the scene. Later that morning, a specialist investigation unit from Berlin took over the case. Initial forensic observations did not indicate any clear signs of sexual assault or disturbance to clothing. However, investigators identified evidence suggesting the body had been moved after death, including visible drag marks leading away from the primary location. This indicated that the area where Christin was found was not the original crime scene, but a secondary deposition site. Initial assumptions suggested that the cause of death could have been asphyxiation, although this had not yet been confirmed at that stage. The body was transported to Berlin, where forensic specialists carried out a detailed examination to determine the exact time and cause of death. Meanwhile, investigators conducted interviews with Christin's family. Her mother stated that her daughter had been in a relationship with Robin and according to her knowledge, he had spent the last night with her. Family accounts described the relationship as stable and without visible conflict. During the early phase of the investigation, information emerged regarding a prior knife-related incident involving Robin's mother. At first, these details remained unclear, and investigators worked to establish the exact circumstances. Attention initially turned toward Robin, Christin's partner, as a potential suspect. He was questioned about his communications on the night in question, including calls and text messages. When asked to provide access to his mobile phone, Robin stated that he had deleted all data earlier that morning, explaining that this was a routine habit. However, this explanation raised concerns among investigators. As such, frequent deletion is not considered standard practice. This behavior contributed to growing suspicion surrounding him. Christin's parents also informed investigators about a woman who had been in contact with their daughter on several occasions in connection with a potential horse sale, identified only as Tanya at that stage. Initially, only her first name was known. However, using a phone number recovered from Robin's device, investigators were able to identify her fully and establish that she was based in Recklinghausen. A further detail drew attention. The vehicle she had been using carried Hamburg registration plates. Investigators followed this lead and contacted the rental company responsible for the vehicle. It was confirmed that Tanya had rented the car during the period relevant to Christin's death. This raised further questions regarding her movements and possible intent. Additional findings introduced a financial dimension to the case. Friends of Christin reported that the couple had taken out mutual life insurance policies. Christin was reportedly in the process of completing final documentation for one of these policies to become active, under the impression it was part of financial planning. A policy document was later recovered from Christin's room, listing a payout of approximately €240,000 in the event of her death, with Robin named as the beneficiary. It also emerged that multiple insurance policies had been taken out in Christin's name, prompting concern from insurance providers. Investigators requested handwriting samples from the family to verify the authenticity of signatures on the documents. Forensic analysis later established that Christin likely died around 1 a.m., with cause of death confirmed as strangulation. During questioning, Robin stated that he had an argument with Christin and left the parking area, claiming he left her there alone. He provided specific timings for his departure and return home. However, mobile phone data obtained from cell tower records contradicted his account. Analysis showed that his phone remained connected to a tower near the parking location at approximately 1 a.m., the estimated time of death. This directly undermined his version of events. At the same time, data indicated that Tanya's phone was also present in the same area during the relevant time frame, placing her at the scene as well. This immediately expanded the scope of the investigation. Due to the risk of flight and her established contact with Robin, investigators moved quickly and travelled to Recklinghausen to locate her. During her interview, the 29-year-old Tanya claimed she had attended the meeting solely to complete payment for the horse purchase. She stated that all parties had shared champagne and that Christin remained behind afterwards to finish her drink, while she eventually left the location. She maintained that Christin was alive and in stable condition when she departed. She also described seeing an unfamiliar man dressed in black, behaving suspiciously at the location. According to her statement, he approached and asked for a cigarette before being told to leave. Investigators considered whether this unidentified male could have played a role in the events. During the inquiry, a female officer conducting the interviews took a more direct approach and questioned Tanya further about her relationship with Robin. It emerged that Tanya knew Robin through equestrian activities and described him as helpful and patient. The officer noted that Tanya appeared unaware that Robin and Christin were in a romantic relationship. When confronted with this information, Tanya became visibly distressed and began to cry. She stated that Robin had promised a shared future with her, including plans involving the purchase of a horse facility requiring significant financial resources. She further suggested that in the event of Christin's death, Robin would stand to receive over €3 million. At this stage, investigators uncovered that multiple life insurance policies had been taken out in Christin's name, with the total value exceeding €2.4 million. The case had now clearly shifted from a domestic incident to a potential financially motivated crime. Further analysis confirmed that 7 of the insurance documents contained forged signatures. Comparison with verified handwriting samples showed clear inconsistencies. Investigators also noted that many policies had been activated without medical examinations, a process that required minimal documentation and allowed rapid approval. As the investigation progressed, a possible motive began to emerge based on financial benefit. One policy alone indicated a payout of €240,000 to Robin in the event of Christin's death. This raised serious concerns regarding intent and planning. Evidence suggested a coordinated scheme involving Robin and Tanya, with indications that Christin's death could trigger significant financial payouts. According to statements and digital evidence, Tanya was allegedly positioned to pose as a horse buyer and arrange the meeting at the swimming facility parking area. She was expected to administer a toxic substance mixed into a drink, intended to cause death. Christin reportedly did not consume the drink due to its unusual taste. Following the failed attempt, further planning was allegedly discussed. Search history recovered from Robin's computer included queries related to toxic substances and methods of inducing sudden cardiac arrest. Under further pressure during questioning, Tanya provided additional details, stating she had been instructed to find someone to carry out the act. Through contacts, she allegedly connected with a man identified as Stephen M., who was reportedly offered payment to execute the plan. On June 20, 2012, Tanya travelled to Berlin in a rented vehicle, accompanied by Stephen M., who was dressed in black and reportedly moved around the parking area in a manner intended to appear suspicious and create a potential false lead. This behaviour was later interpreted as an attempt to construct an alternative explanation for the presence of an unknown suspect. Around midnight, Tanya and Christin arranged to meet at the parking area near the swimming facility. Stephen remained nearby, concealed in surrounding vegetation. At that point, the plan was expected to proceed without interruption. However, Christin arrived accompanied by a friend, which disrupted the assumed scenario. Stephen noticed the group arriving and stepped out from his hiding place. He approached them and tried to start a casual interaction by asking for a cigarette. Tanya quickly realized that the situation was not going as planned. She reacted firmly and told him to leave immediately. Christin seemed slightly surprised by the encounter, but she did not interpret it as something dangerous. Shortly afterwards, she took the champagne bottle and returned home. At around 12:42 a.m., Robin contacted Christine by phone. Although it was late at night, he asked her to come back to the parking area. He also stated that he would be present there. The explanation given was that Tanya had allegedly forgotten to hand over a check for the horse sale. At approximately 1 a.m., all parties met again at the parking area near the swimming facility: Christin, Robin, and Tanya. Tanya then claimed that she could not locate the check. She suggested it may have been misplaced in the car and asked for light so she could search for it properly. Shortly after this, Stephen allegedly emerged from concealment and attacked Christin from behind, using a rope in an attempt to restrain her. According to the investigation, Christin was ultimately strangled during the incident. Police later issued arrest warrants for Tanya and Stephen. Stephen was detained at the residence of his girlfriend. During police questioning, Stephen denied responsibility for the killing. He claimed that Robin was the actual perpetrator and stated that he had only been present as an observer. He also alleged that Robin had verbally insulted him and insisted that matters should be handled personally. Robin also denied any involvement in Christin's death. Forensic examination of Christin's clothing revealed textile fibres that were considered potential trace evidence from the offender. These fibres did not match Robin's clothing. Stephen had also disposed of the clothes he was wearing on the night of the incident. Investigators later concluded that Stephen had likely been seated in the passenger seat of a vehicle. Forensic material collected from that seat area was analysed and compared. Dark textile fibres consistent with black clothing were discovered and later found in several locations, including Stephen's partner's residence, the home of Tanya's brother, and on Christin's jacket. This pattern suggested contact between the victim and individuals connected to the same group. Investigators determined that multiple locations across North Rhine-Westphalia were linked to Stephen's environment. Although he had attempted to dispose of his clothing, forensic traces remained. At this stage, 4 individuals were connected to a suspected coordinated plan involving Christin's death. Shortly afterwards, an insurance agent contacted authorities after identifying similarities between the case and suspicious insurance applications made in Christin's name. It was then established that an older woman had attempted to arrange policies while presenting herself as Christin's mother-in-law. She was identified as Cornelia, Robin's mother. Cornelia, aged 57 at the time of sentencing, was considered a central figure in organising the insurance-related aspect of the case. She was allegedly assisted by Tanya, aged 29, who had a personal relationship with Robin. Tanya's brother Sven, aged 25, was also connected to Stephen, who was later drawn into the plan. Investigators concluded that Christine had been subjected to multiple attempts on her life. These included an earlier knife incident, an attempt involving a poisoned drink, and a later attempt involving a hired attacker. The final attempt resulted in her death. Authorities stated that Christin was not aware of the full extent of the situation, as the events had been staged in a coordinated manner. The trial in Berlin received significant public attention. On January 29, 2015, the regional court issued its verdict. Robin, aged 26 at the time of sentencing, and his mother Cornelia, aged 57, were both sentenced to life imprisonment with a finding of exceptional severity of guilt. Stephen, aged 24, also received a life sentence. Tanya, aged 29, was sentenced to 14 years and 6 months in prison. Her brother Sven, aged 25, who was also involved in the conspiracy, received a life sentence as well. The court addressed the victim's family and expressed hope that the verdict would help them begin rebuilding their lives. The family later described the case as devastating, stating that their sense of normal life had collapsed and that they had to start again emotionally and practically. They also reflected that Christin had trusted the wrong people and believed in their intentions. The case was ultimately described as a situation built on manipulation, trust, and financial motivation, which ended in tragedy. In Germany, a conviction carrying a life sentence does not necessarily mean imprisonment for the rest of a person's natural life without review. After sentencing, both the convicted individuals and the prosecution have the right to file an appeal, known as a revision. If such a challenge is brought forward, the Federal Court of Justice reviews the case and can either modify the judgment or send it back to a regional court for a new trial. A life sentence typically includes a mandatory minimum period of imprisonment. In most cases, at least 15 years must be served. Any time spent in pre-trial detention is deducted from this period, meaning it counts towards the overall sentence. Once the minimum term has been completed, the remaining sentence may, in certain circumstances, be suspended and the person released on probation after a further 5-year period. However, if the court determines that there is particular severity of guilt, the possibility of early release becomes significantly more limited. In such cases, release after 15 years is generally excluded in practice. As a result, the actual time served is often considerably longer, with averages extending to approximately 23 to 25 years before any consideration of release. Christine believed she was in a loving relationship, unaware that Robin and his mother were allegedly involved in a coordinated plan behind the scenes. A young woman with plans for the future lost her life after placing trust in people she considered family. Rest in peace, Christin.